Hi, my name is Martyn Sadler. I'm the editor of the weekly newspaper League Express, which of course covers rugby league in all its dimensions across the world. And today we have a very special discussion. I'm welcoming two very special guests, Mike Rylance, the author of several books on French rugby league, including The Forbidden Game, which is a sensational book, and it's one that I think everybody ought to read who's got any interest at all in rugby league. And Mike is also a weekly contributor to League Express, covering the French elite competition. And then we have Steve Brady, who is our regular match reporter and news provider from France. Steve covers the Catalans and Toulouse clubs and gives us tremendous service from his base in southwest France, although originally from Wigan, I think, Steve.
That's right. Yes, you can tell with the accent.
You saw the light and moved out to the south of France. Obviously, it's just starting with you, Steve, if I may, because it's a massive week for rugby league in France, isn't it? It's a historic week, in fact. The first ever all-French Super League derby. Thursday night at the Stade Gilbert Brutus. It's on Sky Television, so those of us in England can see the game. And it's going to be a fascinating clash, isn't it? And it's going to be without Sam Tomkins, who I believe is out for a while now after that injury against St Helens. So it's going to be a real game to savour, I think. What's your take on it?
Well, I mean, 16 years ago, who would have imagined, Martin, that we'd have a French Super League derby between Perpignan and Toulouse? So it's enormous, not just for French rugby league, but I think for the sport as a whole. We've all been waiting for this for quite some time over here in France. But I think the opportunities it's going to throw up are incredible. First and foremost, the game's going to be very interesting because Toulouse is so Catalan-esque in the unpredictability so far this season. They've lost a lot of games and then gone and beaten St Helens.
Yeah. So the most unlikely result of the year, which I suspect will be the most unlikely result even at the end of the season.
How can you top that? That's impossible, isn't it? So
yeah.
I remember sitting next to Christian Wolff in the Toulouse stadium when I think he was just open-mouthed at the events right at the end of the game, and as was the rest of the stadium. And it was exactly the fillip the club needed. They'd had a torrid time at the start of the season. So, my heart says I would like to see Toulouse on Thursday go on and record the second victory. Although it's difficult with being, I'm a Catalan-based kind of guy.
Yeah, better not. Let's hope there are no Catalan supporters watching this.
Of course, yeah, but cut that bit. But I think just for the sake of the game and for the sake of Toulouse, obviously, we're all desperate in France for Toulouse to stay up, and it's going to be a really, really tough season for them. If they could get the points, and there's no reason why they can't on Thursday night, I think that could really be the launch pad for a really tough fight back by Toulouse. They're playing some good rugby, Martin. It's difficult because you won't see a lot of it. It haven't been on TV much because of various reasons. And people in the UK won't get to see it. I've been to every home game and I like the way they're playing. Christian Wolff himself admitted at the weekend after the Catalan game, he said they learned the lessons from Toulouse. He said they played different rugby league. They haven't come into Super League to spoil and just survive. They want to play enterprising, entertaining rugby league in the Sylvain Hula style. And it's hopefully going to pay off soon for them. Maybe
let's ask Mike what his take on this this game is. Mike, Steve was saying that a few years ago nobody could have ever imagined two French clubs in Super League. Well, you've obviously got more insight into French rugby league than most of us. Could you have imagined it? And what's your take on this game and on Toulouse generally?
Well, I would have liked to have imagined it over the past 16 years, but the way that Super League has gone, it was almost impossible to envisage. Now that we've got this opportunity, let's just say that in the broader sense, now that we've got this opportunity, it's absolutely vital that Super League doesn't throw it away, which is a possibility, obviously, if Toulouse don't stay up. We have to find some method by which both French teams can stay at the top level of the game in Europe. That's what it's about for me. As far as the game on Thursday is concerned, I do agree with Steve in virtually everything he said. The St Helens game was phenomenal, particularly coming after the Wakefield game. I spoke to Sylvain after that game. It was a pretty awful occasion, actually, because it was a rain-lashed Bellevue. People in press box were moaning about, oh, these are two championship sides, they both deserve to go down.
Yeah.
Well, Wakefield have proved the opposite. Toulouse have proved the opposite now. But what makes you realize the strength of Sylvain Oules's character as a coach is that he was trying to work out how to solve the attacking problems that they had at Wakefield within a week. And most people were totally dejected by that. And yet he comes up with the goods and produces this astonishing result, he and his team. You know, it was an amazing turnaround. It was.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting you've said that Super League ought to find a way of keeping Toulouse in the competition. The problem is that Super League doesn't seem to behave in that way, does it? I mean, for example, it's placed this incredible burden on Toulouse of having to pay for the visits of English clubs to France, which I find absolutely outrageous, really. You know, they come into the competition, but then they have an extra burden to bear compared to every other club. That doesn't sound to me as though they actually want Toulouse to be in there.
No, but looking at Super League's record, it's not unknown. You may remember, Martin, as well as I do, that quite a long time ago, when Wakefield were promoted,
I knew you were going to say that, yeah.
they came up with only half the share of the money that other Super League clubs got. I mean, what is this organization playing at? You know, do they want the game to expand and thrive?
Well, I'll give you another example, Mike. Back in 1999, when Gateshead came in, they were given significantly less money than all the other clubs as well. And it was a surefire loser, wasn't it? You know,
absolutely,
because they were inevitably going to incur higher costs than the majority of clubs in setting up a new club. But Super League was so blinkered that it didn't even appear to understand that. So it is quite depressing. And you know, when Catalans came in, they had a 3-year period of grace to establish themselves in Super League. No such luck for Toulouse. So Toulouse have got to do everything the hard way. I mean, the only positive side of that, Steve, if I can come back to you, is that when you do something the hard way, if you succeed, your success seems all the more glorious, doesn't it? And if Toulouse do stay up in Super League this year, then you know it will be a glorious achievement, won't it?
There's a siege mentality that I think Sylvain is encouraging at the stadium because of the events prior to the season with the COVID problems with the captain and the fullback. And then when you consider kind of 15 years, 16 years ago when Catalans came in, Toulouse had the idea that we'd do that too. And they put together a 10-year business plan after a period of time in dominating the French league. So a 10-year business plan is a solid business foundation to build what is a professional sport, a business upon. But every year that passed, they changed the rules. And then only as late as 3 years prior to coming into Super League, they were assured by the chief of Super League that they'd get the same deal as Catalan Dragons. So within 3 years of getting into this top flight, they thought they'd get the Catalans deal. Within that time, it's just evaporated because of the disaster of Toronto and probably COVID added to that too. The scarcity of funds in Super League meant that Toulouse almost have to pay. They're a professional team that have to pay to play. It's an absolute shambles, and the clubs took it on the chin. You're right, Martin. That they have had mountains to climb, and they've climbed them and achieved the goals. But to put that financial burden upon them I think it's appalling, and it's embarrassing for the sport.
Well, I couldn't agree more.
I do agree.
Yeah, go on, Mike.
I was just about to say that, yeah, you're right in saying that Toulouse have taken it on the chin. In fact, they completely accept all the conditions that have been imposed on them. Cedric Garcia told me, we're not whingers. Don't give the impression that, you know, we're complaining about it. We accept it, but they are having to do it the hard way. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
The thing is that when you've got to divert a lot of your resources into paying for other clubs to come out to Toulouse, it obviously means that you can't spend them elsewhere, doesn't it? And I think Toulouse were criticised in some quarters for their fairly modest recruitment prior to the start of this season. You know, they recruited a few players like Chris Hankinson and Matty Russell and one or two others, Gadwin Springer, who are not bad players, obviously, but are not out and out star players. You know, they're not players who would grab a headline. in that sense. Not like, for example, when Catalans recruited Mitchell Pearce to replace James Maloney and so on. And you know, and I just wonder whether the Toulouse were actually deliberately chose to go down that route. And Steve, you can perhaps answer this one, of not splashing out the cash, so to speak, on recruitment, or whether they just felt unable to do that.
I think, like any business, there's a finite amount of resources available. And I had the difficult task of interviewing James Cunningham, Gavin Springer, Chris Hankinson for yourself, Martin, for League Express, and welcoming them back into Super League, all Championship players. And I had to pose that question. You know, exactly the headline signings that people like Stacey Jones coming into Catalans. And it's difficult to put that to a player. And they all said to a man that Sylvain Hules has been following them for quite some time. He's stressed to them how much he wanted them prior to Super League, and if he ever got to Super League, they were going to be signed. So I think Sylvain got the guys he wanted, but it's correct. You can only sign the players that you have resources available to sign. And I think he might have liked to spend a little bit more in the NRL. But whenever you ask him the question, it's no. He's signed the players that he wants, the right players. And when they lost Jonathan Ford and Matt Corrales because of the COVID issue, he could have gone straight downstairs for a second-rate Aussie if he wanted to. But he said, no, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait and get the right guys. And then Ollie Ashall-Butt come in, who's been a lightning bolt for Toulouse since he arrived there.
Great
he
signing,
rejuvenated. Yeah. Fantastic. I saw it. He did a break against St. Helens. Reminded me of Martin Ofaya, the balance and the explosive pace and the intuition that he's got. So he could be a real star this season. And I'd like to see him shine on Thursday night if possible.
Yeah, well, I think... Go on, Mike.
If I could just come in there for a minute. Once again, I completely agree with Steve, but there is no doubt that the fact that Toulouse are having to pay for visiting teams has impacted their budget in terms of recruitment. And so although Sylvain wants to remain very loyal to the players who got them into Super League, he recognized as well that he would need to strengthen the squad. And I think if the money had been available, then he might well have gone down the NRL route, provided the right players were there and they fitted into the Toulouse philosophy. Now, of course, it's virtually too late to do so. Yeah,
that's true. Although it's amazing how many players do sometimes become available mid-season. You know, it's a fairly recurring theme over the years that, you know, you look at NRL clubs and their squads look fairly established and so on, but then for one reason or another, a player becomes available, you know, either because of some controversy or some sort of behavioural issue or whatever it might be, or just falls out of favour, and players do suddenly become available. And of course, there are players who you can recruit from Australia who are not big name players, who then show that they're actually really valuable. And I'm thinking of a guy like Joe Lavadua of Hull FC this year, who hadn't played a single NRL game, but turns out to be a real tremendous signing for them. So, you know, it's certainly not beyond the realms of possibility that other players could become available. But let's just look at some of the French guys who are going to be playing on Thursday night in particular. And Steve, as I say, you've seen all of them in great detail this year. Who are you looking out for? I think in the last game against St. Helens, I was really impressed by Jordan Desaria, for example, the forward who was on the bench and came on, and I thought he had a great game against St. Helens. Looked dangerous every time he had the ball, you know. And it's just great to see young French players like that starting to come to the fore.
Exactly. Like Steve McNamara started introducing these players. He revolutionised the academy side. We've got rid of the academy competition for French, for the younger part of the club. And a player like Jordan Desaria went elsewhere, went to England to try and further his career. His second time around at Catalans now for Jordan, and he's grasped it with both hands. He's physically developed incredibly, and he's got the pace and the balance for such a big guy to do some damage. But the one that goes under the radar for me is Ben Julien. You know, he went to Warrington and came and joined Catalans. He doesn't seem to be able to hold down a regular place at the Catalans. He seems to fill in for when Matt Whitley's out. And I just think he was a sensation against Saints. I know it was in a defeated team.
Yeah.
The energy he showed, I thought it was, for me personally, apart from Ben Garcia, who's consistently the best player at Catalans, I thought Ben Julien was outstanding.
Yeah, and Arthur Morgue is back, of course, now. He returned against St Helens from the bench and replaced Sam Tompkins when Sam got injured, although he got on the field too late to really make a difference, I suppose.
Yeah, I remember after the grand final, Martin, you asked Steve McNamara the question, did you play Arthur Morg too late in that game? And Steve was bristling because he was obviously fed up because he'd lost the grand final. And maybe Arthur will see far more time now in the game. And I think that could be the real firework for Catalans, because it's been a slow burn start to the season. They did have this great wins again. And I think Steve was happy with that. He said, don't get too excited with the wins and don't get too down with the defeats. He was happy with that kind of narrow angle trajectory instead of Saints just flying in and beating everybody by 40, 50 points. Arthur Morg now replacing the man of steel, don't forget, Sam Tompkins, could be the catalyst for Catalans. And I think his explosive pace from, I mean, his dodgy ankle, he's recovered fully now, but my God, against St Helens, he's left and right. You don't know which way he's going to go next. He's kicking goal line touch lines from in windy conditions. He's got the lot. He's a jack in the box. He reminds me an awful lot, and I never was lucky enough, or I'm old enough to have seen Puy Jobert play, the very famous Pipette French player. Looks a bit like him for me. Got that kind of skill. You don't know he's going to. He doesn't smoke cigarettes on the touchline, and he probably doesn't drink brandy at half time. But he does remind me an awful lot of footage that I've seen of Puy Jobert. And that's the case.
That is a great name, Mike. Obviously, that's a name that you'll have studied incredibly over the years, Puy Jobert. But it's interesting. On Thursday night, we're going to have two really interesting full backs going against each other, because Arthur Morg for Catalans, of course, will start the game, I assume, right from the start this week without Tompkins being there. And for Toulouse, Ollie Ashall-Bott, who Steve's already mentioned, has started his Toulouse career with some sensational form. That's the thing to really look forward to seeing, isn't it?
Yeah, the thing I like about both players is that they inject a great deal of pace, and there's no substitute for it. The first time I saw Morg was when he was playing for the Catalans reserves, and straight away you could see he's got this explosive pace that just rips defenses apart when given the opportunity. Ashall-Bott is very, very similar, although probably over a longer stretch than Morg, who relies on acceleration more than anything else, I would say.
I think both of them can change pace as well, can't they? And can change direction on a sixpence, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Puy Jobert never quite had the same pace, it has to be said. And if Arthur Morg puts on about 3 or 4 stone in the next few years, you might come to look a bit more like him. Yeah, I mean, both, great characters. And it's the type of play that the French game does throw up, Well, let's hope so in Arthur Morg's case, anyway.
Yeah. Do you think, Mike, that Toulouse could win Thursday's game? Would you go so far as to stick your neck out and say that result is a possibility?
I would say that result is a possibility, but I don't, for fear of putting the jinx on it, I'm not going to say either they will or they won't. But, I would love to see them win. I would love to see the Catalans win as well, for that matter, of course. But, for Toulouse, it's far more vital that they get another couple of points under their belt before we get much further into the season.
I'll tell you another game on Thursday that's very important for Toulouse, and that is Leeds versus Huddersfield, because at the moment, the way things look, their biggest rival for relegation looks as though it could be Leeds Rhinos, which who would have ever thought we'd be saying that not very long ago. But Leeds play Huddersfield, which, at the moment, they're probably not the favourites to win. And then a week or two, I think it's about a week later, they play Toulouse at Headingley, don't they? So that's going to be an absolutely massive game for both sides when it comes. And who knows how many points Toulouse will have by then, of course.
Yeah, it's difficult to say, Martin. Again, it's the most unpredictable side of the game to consider that Leeds would be in a relegation battle with Toulouse. You just couldn't make those kind of headlines up. Even in League Express, you couldn't do that. But
no. Fake news, we would have said, wouldn't we?
Of course, yeah. But it's what a fascinating game it's going to be. I mean, obviously, I would have preferred Toulouse to have the Catalans deal and no relegation for 3 years. But what drama this is going to put up this season, what headlines it's going to make as the season rolls on. And this game at Leeds so early could be a huge game.
What's the crowd prediction for Thursday night? Is it going to be a sellout, do you think, at Stade Gilbert?
There's been some moaning because the game's on at 9 p.m. over here on a Thursday evening, and the drive from Toulouse to Perpignan could be 2.5 hours. It's difficult for fans to get over there. It's going to be 8+, I would imagine, Martin, hoping for 9.5. And I'll give Catalans and Toulouse full credit. They promoted it over here. It's in the newspapers, it's on TV, it's on radio. They're really pushing for this. Toulouse's core support will be 1,500. Whether all of that will come, I'm not sure. I think 8.5, 9,000.
Isn't it rather disappointing, though, that the first Super League derby, French derby, is being played in Catalans and not Toulouse? Because wouldn't it have been sensible to play this game in Toulouse and to?
Well, I'll add to that. I'll add to that, Martin. Wouldn't it have been sensible for the first game of the season to be Toulouse versus Catalans and get Super off to a cracking start?
Yeah.
Instead of a fairly nondescript fixture such as they had against Huddersfield, I think it was. Huddersfield to do very well since then, but nobody would have known it at the start of the season.
No. It shows a sort of lack of imagination. I've always thought that the way you construct the fixture list is an important part of marketing the game. You know, you think through very carefully what fixtures will have what appeal and at what time. And certainly that would have been a terrific start to the season, wouldn't it? Going to Toulouse and making a really massive thing about it. And it just seems to be an opportunity missed. Would you agree with that, Steve?
The other side of the coin is, Martin, that towards the end of the season, end of August, the return derby is going to be at Toulouse. So that would stimulate an awful lot of interest at a time when rugby union isn't being played and when football isn't being played in the city. So I think that's a good move to have the second one at Toulouse. I don't mind the way they've arranged that. The problem I've got is, again, it's a 9 p.m. on a Thursday evening. It's a working week in France. So both of the derby fixtures, because of Sky Sports requirements, are at 9 p.m. for French people on a Thursday evening when they've got a working week. So even Catalans fans will think, by the time the game's over, we're going to get home at 1:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
It's just...
I mean, it's good to think that Sky want to broadcast the French derby, but why on earth can't it be on a Saturday afternoon? You know, that's the point, when so many other, Catalans games are actually played.
That's the traditional time, Saturday afternoon, Rugby League in Perpignan, and Toulouse are trying to do the same thing. For the life of me, and forgive me, I haven't asked Sky the question, why they are both on Thursday evenings at 9 p.m. in France, because don't forget we're an hour ahead of you. It befuddles me.
Can we just go on to talk about the World Cup now? Because we've spent probably about 25 minutes so far talking about Thursday night's game effectively. But looking ahead to the autumn, Mike, if I can just come to you again now, how optimistic are you about how the French will perform in the World Cup? Because obviously they've had a few disappointing World Cups, but you look at some of the talent coming through now, and it fills me with a certain sense of optimism that they might do better and get beyond the pool stages and get to the quarterfinal, perhaps even the semi-final. Who knows? Yeah,
I'd like to be optimistic about their World Cup hopes. The one thing that prevents me from being a little bit more optimistic is the fact that there are a number of players in their squad who are relatively inexperienced. They did well for half the game against England in last year. Yeah. But it was only half a game, let's not forget. They got off to a bad start.
Yeah.
It's encouraging to think that there are good young players coming through. I think this World Cup might be just a little bit early for them to mold into a cohesive team. But they have got, Laurent Fresson is working very hard with them, and they have got, of course, Trent Robinson backing up with advice and tips for the players. So they could do better than they have done in previous years, but let's not hold out too great hopes at this stage. I think 2025 might be a better test.
Well, hopefully it will be, because of course that tournament will be in France, and that's going to be a real make or break for Rugby League in France, isn't it?
I think the problem with the France team is that, going back to the question of inexperience, they're always likely to fall foul of some of the stronger Pacific teams, the Samoans or the Tongans, for example. Obviously New Zealand and Australia, but some of those teams which are just below the top three could well prove difficult for France to master.
Yeah, what's your take on that, Steve?
Yeah, obviously the golden generation of this new crop of Catalan player coming through, and Toulouse are doing pretty good with their under-19s and the reserve side in Elite One. I think 2025 is a more realistic proposition for France to have any chance of making quarterfinals and semis. I agree with Mike completely. Just a little too soon. Yeah, I don't think the improvements have been significant enough for them to make any great noise in the World Cup in England. It would be nice to see them get there, but you're correct, Mike. I think the Pacific Islands would make hay with France.
Can we just look ahead to the tournament when it's going to be held in France in just over 3 years' time? Because of course we had that incredible press conference with the French Prime Minister announcing that the World Cup would be held in France in that year. Since then, of course, it's gone a bit quiet because presumably there's a lot of work being done just below the surface, not for public consumption and so on. But are you getting any feedback? Do you have any insights into how it's going, and what are you expecting of a World Cup in France in 3 years' time?
Well, I mean, obviously, it could be a celebration for French Rugby League. The work that's been done now is behind the scenes. The new French president, although he's 18 months into the job now, Luc Lacoste, almost on a weekly basis, you can see him in Paris, meeting businessmen, meeting partners. He had a massive achievement in my eyes over Christmas and New Year, in that he elevated French wheelchair rugby league to elite sports status. He got elite sports status for wheelchair rugby league. And that opens so many doors for that level. They say that the French Rugby League World Cup is going to be the most inclusive of them all, with more stages for rugby league, for juniors, for men, women, and wheelchair. And I think the energy that Luc Lacoste has brought into the top level at the French Federation is a game changer, as much as Toulouse's inclusion in Super League. I think this new French president could be the best news we've ever had for the French game.
Do you share that view, Mike? Because we're just starting to run out of time, by the way, so we'll have to draw it slowly to a close. But Luc Lacoste, I had some suspicion of him when he first was appointed, because he came from a rugby union background, didn't he? He was involved with USAP in Perpignan. But actually, I think he's been a breath of fresh air for the game, and he's done tremendous things that none of his predecessors seemed capable of doing. Do you take that view, Mike?
Yeah, I do, absolutely. He has been a breath of fresh air. He's always said that he's ambitious for the game, which is something that we've not really seen before on a national level. And I'm just a little bit concerned, however, that the federation itself, which is quite small in terms of officials and people who can go out there and do the work, might possibly have overreached themselves with the program that they've put out, not just for the World Cup, but for its legacy in terms of expanding the game across France. But yeah, I mean, aim high is the message, and we have to back him because he's brought to the French game things which we've not seen there for quite a long time now.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that they have given themselves an almighty task, haven't they, to organise not just one World Cup but 4 World Cups in effect, in a fairly short space of time. Actually, just over 3 years. I mean, we talk about Super League looking for a strategic partner, but the French Federation, I think, probably needs a strategic partner if it's going to really pull this off and make the most of it. Would you think that?
There have been strategic partners in the past, and none of them have come up with the goods, to be honest.
No.
I think the way that Luc Lacoste is going about it, by using his own network of influence, is possibly the way to go.
Yeah.
Bringing in strategic partners who know nothing about the game, or very little, and then deciding that this is the way you should go, is, to me, not the best route of action.
No, I agree. What's your take on that, Steve?
I'm with Mike. I mean, Luc Lacoste is a very political person. He's very comfortable in the higher echelons of French government, and he's proven that with his achievements so far. I think that's where the central source of funding is going to come from the government. You aren't going to get somebody just waltzing in and dealing with the French Federation with a blank check. But government funding for this, Luc Lacoste is the guy to secure that. And I think that side of it, yes, they are ambitious. That's the French way. They're aiming high, as Mike says. But if they can achieve even 3/4 of what they're planning to do, it'll be sensational for French Rugby League.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? The French government does take sport quite seriously. They are hosting the Rugby Union World Cup, aren't they, in 23 next year, and various other world events. The Olympics, obviously, in the following year. So the Rugby League World Cup will be the third of a trifecta in a sense. And I think the French, obviously very proud people, if they're hosting something, they want it to be successful. And the government, it seems to me, will back events. And they've clearly shown that they're prepared to back the Rugby League World Cup because of the Prime Minister's association with it at that incredible launch. So, Mike, are you confident that the French government will actually deliver the goods and give its support, to produce a really great tournament in 3 years' time?
Well, unless something goes sadly wrong in the elections in 2 weeks' time, yes, because they've given their commitment, and I'm sure they will be kept. French sport is very centralized, perhaps more than ours is actually. Yeah. It does rely to a large extent on what comes from the government. We can just keep our fingers crossed that things go the right way.
Okay, and that's a great note to, I think, end this discussion on. We always keep our fingers crossed and hope things go the right way in rugby league. Sometimes they do, and of course, sometimes they don't. But let's hope in this case that they do. Mike and Steve, thank you both for participating in this discussion. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope the people who view it will enjoy it as well. And I'd just like to wish you both the very best. And if you can just hold on a second, but for now, we'll say goodbye to our viewers, and hopefully we'll meet again before too long. Thank you both very much.